each viewport has its own seaplane, which is a construction plane. So it's called a construction plane because it's a plane. It's a plane that you work on or construct off or draw on. So if we go into the top viewport, it's making sure that planet is off and our on snaps are turned off. And if we start to draw some curves, as you can see, when I drew them in the top viewport, they all have been drawn on a flat plane. So that there, that plane, that is the construction plane of the top viewport. So if you were to describe the positioning of the construction plane of the top viewport, the plane is positioned perpendicular to the top view. So the angle of the top viewport is, you're looking down on the z-axis, and the construction plane is perpendicular to that. Another thing to note about the positioning of the construction plane of the top viewport is that that plane along here, it's centered at that right there, that's the center of 3D space, center of the origin, and the plane is down there. The plane could be up here or down here, but it's not, it's right in the center. So if we call this seaplane of the top viewport, hide that. Now let's go into the front viewport. So you notice, you can see the plane, the construction plane of the front viewport, it's different to the top viewport. That's the top viewport. So if you were to describe the positioning of the construction plane of the front viewport, it's the exact same as the top. The plane is positioned perpendicular to the front view, and it's centered at the origin. And it's the exact same for the right, the construction plane of the right viewport. Perpendicular to the angle of the right view. So these construction planes, they're infinite in size and invisible. The perspective viewport, the construction plane of it, is the exact same as the top viewport. So if I start drawing some curves in the perspective viewport, you can see that that construction plane is the exact same as the top seaplane. So if I turn the top seaplane on, there are some things that will affect drawing on the seaplane. if you have snaps turned on, and if you snap to something, I'll just move that down. So if I come up into the top viewport, and if I start drawing curves, again, it'll automatically draw on the seaplane. However, in the top viewport, if I have the snaps on, and if I snap to something that isn't on that plane, for example this polyline, it now doesn't draw on that plane. See how I just drew off that plane? And as soon as I click somewhere that isn't snapping to anything, it'll go back to drawing on the default seaplane of the top viewport. If I go back down, snap to something that's not on the seaplane, and if I snap to something that's back on the plane, it'll go back to the construction plane. So that is how on snaps can affect the construction plane when drawing curves. So one other thing to note is this planner button here. If you turn that on, again same thing, it'll automatically draw it on the plane, and when you snap to something that isn't on the plane, however the difference is when you have this planner button turned on, if I click somewhere else that isn't snapping to anything, it won't go back to the default construction plane of the top viewport. It'll continue to draw on that last plane of the curve that I snapped to. So it's now automatically drawing it down here, and I'm not snapping anything to anything. Had this have been turned off, it would have automatically gone back up to here. So if I draw something at a different level, let's take a look at what this does again when it's turned on. So it's just drawing on the default plane, and when I snap down there, it'll continue to draw on that plane. Then if I snap back up here, it'll continue to draw back up here, and it won't go back on to the top default seaplane until I snap back up there, which is what's happening right now. So from the top viewport, it looks as though I've been drawing in the same plane, but I haven't been, if you take a look at these planes. There is one other thing that can affect working on a seaplane, and that's when you press the control on your keyboard. So if I press control right now and then click, you can't do anything in the top viewport, but you can see what's happening is I'm now moving perpendicular to the construction plane. I'm moving in the same direction of that top view in the Z axis. So if I click there, again, because I got this planner on, it'll remain on that plane. If I were to turn that off, it'll go back to the default plane. I always leave this planner option on. So let's just say we wanted to draw this pyramid here, and how you would integrate all the construction planes together. So firstly, to draw this square, you obviously can't draw that in the front viewport because it's going to draw the square not in the right positioning. Same with the front viewport. So that is where you would use the C-plane of the top viewport to draw a square like that. Then, in order to go measure a certain distance up, we'll draw a line from here to here, then go up a particular measurement. So to do that, we need to draw a line snapping from here to here. You can't really do that in the middle viewport. I guess you can snap to there, but you can't snap back here in the top viewport. It's the same thing with the right viewport. So to draw a line from there to there, you'd use the top viewport or the perspective viewport. So now what we need to do is draw a line snapping to the middle of that line, going up. So again, to snap to the middle of there, you can't really do that in these two viewports and construction planes. You really need the top construction plane. But then the problem with this is you can't go up high. So in order to finish this curve off, we'll transition to another viewport, another seaplane, whether it's the front or right, doesn't matter. We can go up a certain distance. So for these two curves here, we just used the C-plane of the top viewport, but for this one here, we used a combination of two different construction planes, the top and the front viewport C-plane. Then, in order to fill it all in, again, these viewports wouldn't really, I guess you could use these viewports. Then if you wanted to snap back there, you can't really. So to draw these in, this is where you're probably better off using the perspective viewport. So that's an example of how to integrate all the viewports together when drawing curves. This all can actually be done in the perspective viewport. Snap from the middle to the middle. And then remember, if you wanted to move perpendicular to the construction plane, you hold down the control, which I'm doing right now. That allows you to go perpendicular. So that's an example of how you can draw everything in the perspective viewport. So let's do something a little bit more challenging. Join them together, then extrude it. what I'm going to do is rotate it. So let's just say this was the rail of a chair, and we want to draw curves on this face right here. So the problem is none of these seaplanes match the plane of that face there. You take a look, those three construction planes, none of them match this here. So when you have something like this, there's two approaches to it. One approach is to draw on another plane and then position it to the plane that you want it to be. And another approach is to just draw directly on that plane. Example of drawing off on another plane and then positioning it on place. Trying to draw a rectangle. Take that curve, move it off to the side, rotate it. Okay, draw a line from the middle to here, divide that by 3. Copy. So now what I'm going to do, so I just drew the curves off on another plane. Now what I'm going to do is position it on the plane that I want it to be on. So I'm going to move from here to here, rotate from here to here. I just moved and rotated that into place. So that is one example. Which is drawing the curve on another plane and then repositioning it on the plane that you want it to be on. Another approach is to draw directly onto the plane that you want to draw on. So in order to do that, you need to reposition the seaplane. Just delete that. So to reposition the seaplane, right click on the viewport title, go set seaplane to object. So I just clicked on that face there. So what's happened now is the seaplane has moved so that it's in line with that face there. So if I disable my snaps, start to draw some curves, you can see that the seaplane of that perspective viewport has changed. It's now in line with that end there. end face. So the same principles apply with seaplanes even when you reposition it. If you snap to anything that's not on that plane, which is what I'm snapping to right now, you won't draw on that plane. So you just have to be careful where you're snapping to. The edge of this face here we know is on the same plane of the construction plane we just created. So we know if we snap anywhere along here, it'll be okay. So snap to the middle there, snap to the middle there, divide that by 3, draw a circle, snapping to the point. I'll copy from point to point. So that's a second way of drawing on another plane, is to just draw directly onto the plane by repositioning the construction plane. Once you've created a new construction plane, you can save that construction plane by right-clicking on the viewport title, set seaplane, then named seaplanes. So we click on the save button here, we'll just call it whatever, hit OK. So that's it there. So if you close that, and if you ever wanted to go back and reset that seaplane, you right click on the viewport title, go set seaplane, and that's it down there. If you click on that, it'll automatically adjust the seaplane after that. In order to restore the seaplane back to its default, you right click on the viewport title, go set seaplane. So the default seaplane of the top viewport is called world top. Default seaplane of the front viewport is world front, and that's the right. So the perspective viewport is the same as the top viewport. So we'll click on world top. So what's happened right now, so we've just restored the seaplane of the top view of the perspective viewport back to its default. Just say we've got this curve here, and we want to draw a circle perpendicular to the end of that curve. We can't use any of our default seaplanes because it's not in the same plane as the end of that curve. So again, there's two options to do that. Firstly, draw on another plane and then position it in place. So that's it. Just drawn it in another plane. And then to position it in place, go transform, orientate, perpendicular to curve, select objects to orientate, press enter when done, snap to the center. And I snap to the end there. So I've now just positioned that curve perpendicular to the end. So the second approach is to just draw directly on that plane, and to do that you reposition the seaplane. So right click on the top viewport, go set seaplane, perpendicular to curve, select the curve to orientate to, snap to the end there. Now I draw a circle. So I just drew directly on that plane. If you're new to using Rhino, I wouldn't bother changing the seaplane. I would go ahead with the first approach, which is drawing off on another plane and then repositioning the curve. The reason why is because you develop a really good skill, which is being able to reposition something within 3D space. And that the more you practice repositioning things and moving them around, the better you get at it. So I've used orientate perpendicular to curve and also move and rotate, but there's a lot more commands than that that allow you to reposition things. Up until now we've been talking about how seaplanes affect curves and drawing curves. Let's take a look at how they affect other commands. For example, some of the transformation commands. So if I have a circle, draw a circle in the top viewport with the top seaplane, and then let's reposition this seaplane back to its default firstly. Set seaplane, build top. So if I use the move command, which is a transformation command, you can see when I'll use copy's probably better. So you can see when I'm copying it, it's only copying on that construction plane. I can't do any depth work. Again, I can if I have a snap on and I snap to something below it. That's the only way. So you can see that that's the same. Let's take a look at the command array polar. So array polar, that's what I want to array in the center. Just say I want to array 8 items. So I'm going to change that to the top seaplane. Now let's perform that exact same command but in the front viewport. I'll do an array polar. So you can see how when I did the array polar command in the front viewport, it turned out different to the top viewport. It's because it arrayed it in the construction plane of the front viewport. If I change this to the front, so I'm sure you get the idea what's going on here if I were to do it in the front, the right viewport.